is a software engineer, and when I look at you guys working away, and I come in with my glittery fans and everything, I feel terrible because I'm always trying to drag them off the computer. It looks like a sea of my husband's. Like, geez, do we have to deal with the feather fans again? Like I said, I'm April Hadaway, and I'm representing Scandalesque. I'm not actually a company member of Scandalesque. I'm handling the business side. I do my own burlesque solo routines that I work on, but that's outside of the business, so I've got kind of quite a bit going on right now. For starters, we have the Burlesque Weekend coming up, which is featuring Catherine Delish, and I'll make sure you guys all get flyers before you leave this. She's fantastic. She's amazing. If you guys are not familiar with her work, she's actually she's a burlesque performer in her own right, but she's also the costume designer for Dita Von Teese. So if you're familiar with Dita Von Teese's work, I will pass. I have a lot of show and tell items. I used to teach English, by the way, so I've got show and tell items to keep you interested. But this is a picture of Catherine Delish, which you guys can start to pass around. But she's amazing, and we're very excited to have her out because typically, Arizona, we've had pockets of burlesque here and there, but nothing that's really been ongoing, and we're trying to build more of a burlesque community. So that's kind of my hope and my aim. Christy Zandlow is a classically trained ballet dancer who wanted to be a ballerina, but she didn't feel like she quite had the body type to do that. So she actually went out to the middle of the desert and met a woman named Satan's Angel, who was a burlesque legend from the 1960s, and trained her. She was her protege. She trained her and she taught her everything she knew about burlesque, even passing on her flaming pyrotechnic pasties that Pyra does now. Everybody in burlesque usually has some sort of gimmick, including myself, and it's not Liberian gimmick either, I promise. But she's the queen of the blazing bustier, and she has pyrotechnic pasties that she usually does in every show. Her partner, Juliana Curtis, is a vocalist, as well as she was a runner-up for a Miss Fitness pageant a few years back, right before she found out she was pregnant. So she's now a mommy, but she's also involved with her singing and her dancing as well as fitness. So that's sort of where we're at with burlesque, and I'll give you a little bit more background as far as how I got involved in the business side of things. Pass these around as well. Get some going over here. The blonde is Pyra. Just some of the past shows that they've had recently. Anybody over here that I can get? Scandalesque started, sorry about that. Scandalesque started with Christy and Juliana coming together for their love of performance, and they decided that they needed to shake up Arizona a little bit with something new and different, so they began looking into burlesque and got involved that way. I, on the other hand, this time last year was an English teacher at Tempe High School. So my background, however, is in theater and performance studies, and I went back to work as a teacher in order to make a living, because when I moved here I was broke, and there's not much I could do as far as theater, so I went into teaching and was a full-time English teacher during the day, but I had some health issues, and in order to kind of get me back on track, and my original goal was to get into community theater and just start doing some theater again. I sought out Christy so that I could get some dance training and get my body back on track, and got kind of sucked into the burlesque world and started helping with business as well as doing my own performances. Burlesque really is kind of a do-it-yourself type of environment, and I think that's what's really appealing to most people that are in burlesque. And you guys probably all understand that because this is definitely a do-it-yourself group. That's what I'm seeing here as far as what I know. So, nobody's talking. This is like high school all over again. They just don't look up, don't look up. I got involved working with them from a business standpoint, but really just to get myself back in shape. And the burlesque was appealing to me for number one, it's different than what most people think it is. When you think of burlesque, what do you think of?
Sex.
Anything else? What else? Feathers and 30s. Well, the term burlesque actually means to mock. And if you go backward and look about the history of burlesque, what you'll find is that burlesque really is about mocking the social norms of the time. And it started about 100 years, well, more than 100 years at this point, but back in England. And the naked women sort of came as a way to poke fun at the social norms of the time. So really what you're seeing is American burlesque right now it's very specific to American culture, but burlesque overall, the Europeans see burlesque in a very, very different way. My feeling with burlesque, and the reason I like it, is because, well, Hitting on the Keys described it as do-it-yourself burlesque. And when I was at BurleyCon, which is a big burlesque convention every year in Seattle, I went to several classes, and we did some work on Cyprianism, which is, I don't know how you guys are about art. Are you guys strictly, you got some left brain, right brain?
No, we got it all.
You got it all, great. Okay, that's what I like. Whole brain people, that's the goal. Whole brain people. So you guys are familiar with art, and what you do is a bit artistic as well. There was a term called Cyprianism that goes back many decades to ancient Cyprus, which deals with primarily the courtesan's relationship to the artist. And it really focused on the revered outsider, which some of you guys might relate to. Sort of that person that's kind of outside the general public. They're revered, but at the same time they're sort of shamed and sort of pushed away. And that was very appealing to me because I've always felt that way. And burlesque felt like a natural fit because it connected to that idea of that concept of Cyprianism. And for instance, with me, I may look like this librarian at the moment. Where'd my bag go? Oh, I've misplaced my bag. But when I get going with burlesque, I sort of change and transform. And ideally, ideally that is sort of our focus now, is to take burlesque from this art form and really make it available to ordinary women and teach ordinary women how to be extraordinary in their own right. So while I may look like the librarian now or the English teacher now, when I do my photo shoots and when I do my performances, I come alive. And here's some pictures for you that you guys can pass around. Some photo shoots of me when I make my transformation. Because really and truly burlesque is transformative. And not to let you guys out of the loop, it's a creative form of entertainment as well. And my most recent solo production, I did a number to Patti Smith's Piss Factory, where I was a factory worker who uses what she has in her factory to put a costume together on stage. I do a big reveal and then become a fan dancer. So my husband has helped me with these prototypes of LED pasties. So this one actually needs a little repair, but I'll pass these around for you as well. So this is kind of what...
You'd think we'd go crazy over that.
We're working on a whole line, actually. I have a whole line of costume pieces with LED pasties, and one of them's not working, but you can flip the other one on.
How does it work?
Actually, the way, I'll tell you, you know what? I have a stool, whoops. I have a stool in my performance, and I have like a little cart that I use, and I'm doing sort of like a factory worker kind of production, and my fans typically are sitting behind me. I have them already on, but I'm covered when I'm doing this, and then I bring the fans around. Oh, I'm still sitting here. See if I can do it with a mic too. I'm still sitting here, so I'm covered this way, and then I can get them off, get my bra off, take it off, quick snap of the button like you saw to turn it on, and then the reveal, and then they light up. So then I can do the rest of the routine with the pasties on. So, and what Pyra does is very similar with her pyrotechnics, although she has a human motorcycle that she rides on stage, and then she actually there's a lot of sparks and a lot of pyrotech. A human motorcycle. He's very good looking, ladies. He'll be in the show. So, but you guys got both of them working. I'm in the right spot.
We're geniuses.
We touched them. That happens.
That'll work. I'm all for it. I know who to call when I need trouble. I have trouble with this stuff. So, so that's what we do from the theatrical standpoint, and it's kind of wild and crazy. But at the same time, all of us are pretty ordinary women. Juliana, like I said, is a mom, and she's a full-time mom. And Pyra is classically trained to teach ballet by day. And as recently as last year, I was teaching English. So we're pretty ordinary women during the day. So this transformation that we make is really something that I think is very helpful for women and that I'd like to see grow in the community because I think it gives women a voice. Theater is a great place to just really give women a platform. When you're on stage and you have people's attention, you can speak what you know, and you can have people come and listen to you. So to me, I think it's really important, and also the dance aspect with fitness and health, and bringing those things in, combining those things to really get at women. And Pyra and I went, earlier in the summer, we went up to Prescott. We did a class for a group called Damsels in Distress, and we had several women there that were breast cancer survivors. And I was a little bit, at first, helping her teach classes, assisting her. I wasn't sure how everybody would approach the classes, how they would feel about it, if it was too much for them, especially because these were older women. But the minute, I tell you what, the minute we broke out these fans, the boas came out, they lit up. And that's when I was hooked. That's when I knew that this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to help more women get involved in this with health, fitness, taking care of themselves, empowering themselves. And we actually had one of the women who came up to us at the end, and she says, I haven't smiled like this in 2 years. So it was really a touching moment, and that's why I'm in it. I think we all are performers at heart, but my goal and my hope is that with this weekend coming up, that we can really sort of corner the market on women's health, empowering women, making women feel more confident about themselves, and also bring you guys a good show. So that's our goal. So that's it for me. If you guys have any questions, or if you want to, I can send around my. You guys want to get your hands on a couple of feather fans? This. Give me just a second, Kate.
Oh yeah.
This one is more of a finished one. By the way, a lot of times you'll see performers and they buy their fans. We don't do that at all. We actually make everything. So I made these from scratch. I put every rhinestone on, which takes forever. And you'll see, and you're not going to hurt them, believe me. We batter and bruise them in the course of workouts. But these are not quite finished. I've got stickies on these, but I will go back and revamp these so that they have actual rhinestones on them. Guys, any grabbers for the fans? You guys are all looking at me like, she's nuts.
Come on, they're fun.
Woo!
So, from what I understand, there's a big difference between stripping and burlesque. So, what do you find when you're trying to sell your show or someone's asking about your show? What do you find is the most common misconception, and how do you guys fight that misconception?
Well, it's interesting because, and this comes up again and again, and I think we get kind of used to it. We just say, okay, we know, and it just kind of move on, but we do find ourselves having to answer that question a lot. My experience of burlesque is very different because I have a theater and performance studies degree, so mine was very textbook, and again, when I think of burlesque, I think of that humor and that poking fun at social norms that goes back, the history goes back 100 or more years. So to me, I see that as being a sort of a disconnect with some people, but I think that there's room for all sorts of different interpretations of it. There's always going to be people that are not quite comfortable with what we do, but I think that we're in 2010, and the more people see it and get used to it and figure out what it really is, they'll just understand it and feel comfortable with it. And I think the easiest way for them to do that is just to come to a show and see what we do. Although Scandalesque has an interesting dynamic. They have the more risque shows that they do in sort of a Vegas-y kind of way in the evening. And then they have Vega, which is their corporate shows, so they perform for more, it's more conservative dress, they don't do pasties. So that's kind of got like a Vegas aesthetic to it, where they just come out and they do a show and they focus on their technical skill. So, did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned fire. I was curious what props you use, or like what kinds of performances.
Yes, and I know that there are I know there's belly dancers that use different types of fire elements and things like that. And to my understanding, and it's top secret, so I can't know everything. But from my experience with working with Pyra, it's she has some sort of pyrotechnics, but I know it can be dangerous, but I think they have it all worked out. I don't know all the details exactly about how she goes about it, but there are fire tassels that a lot of the girls use where they set them on fire. She doesn't do that. Hers are very specific pyrotechnics. I believe she's the only person that uses these outside of Satan's Angel, who originally passed the torch on to her, so to speak. So, but yes, she definitely has lots of sparks and pyrotechnics. But it's very dangerous. I'm sure you know it's very dangerous with fire. So there's been several people that have asked her to show her how she does it, and for liability reasons, she has to be very careful. And it's pretty much strictly what she does and she alone does at this point. Anything else?
So I'm a big fan of the musical Gypsy and kind of the story behind it.
Okay, yeah.
How has burlesque changed since the 1920s and the 1930s? Do you feel like it's more understood and more liberal now, like you guys can do a lot more stuff, or is it just about the same?
It's interesting. I think people are still very, it's funny what gets people and what doesn't get. My husband, as well as being an engineer, is also from Scotland, so I see a very different sort of approach to things. Modesty Blaze, who is British, gave a speech on what burlesque was, and she still says, you know, Americans keep talking about vintage burlesque, throw back to the 50s and the pinups, and she says that's still new to us. To us, burlesque is more along the lines of like Monty Python, if you will, you know, humor and comedy and poking fun at what's going on in society. I think as far as the sexy part of it, as far as the stripping part of it, which I would always say burlesque is more a focus on the strip, on the tease rather than the strip, and a creative tease at that. I think that in a lot of ways, it's probably not that much different from the 20s or the 30s. I think some people are more accepting, but there's still an element that's very taboo. The first show I did with pasties, by the way, with the light-ups that I gave to you guys, we were at the Trunk Space downtown, which is a little bitty bar downtown. We had a group coming in, touring from New York, and we drove up. This was my first solo performance. We drove up, and they had this rickety fence around the place, and they were doing it outside, and it was June, so it was ridiculously hot already. And I could literally see the girls. We were the finale, so I could see the girls when we drove up through the fence, this rickety fence, and I thought, oh my God, what are we doing? And apparently when we got there, I got up on stage, did my routine, cops showed up in the middle of it. Someone told on them. I think they had some neighbors that weren't very fond of what they were doing, and the cops came in and said, we heard there was nudity going on, what's happening? And for some reason they got rid of them, and it wasn't that big of a deal. But and Christy actually said, geez, we probably should have gotten arrested, and then we would have gotten more attention, and we could have done. I think that's what happened to Sally Rand back in the day. She was doing her bubble routine completely naked, and she got arrested, and from there, someone bought her a theater so she could have a place to do it on her own. So, you know, getting arrested might not always be that bad of a thing.
Best advice ever.
What's that?
Is this the best advice ever?
Heard straight from the English teacher's mouth. Give that advice.
Well, and that's the interesting thing. When I first started doing this, I was at Tempe High School, and I was working on Mill Avenue, and we were doing shows at the Cherry Lounge, and it dawned on me midway through. I said, okay, I am teaching high school like this during the day on the same street that I'm taking my clothes off at night. So One other thing that I will point out about burlesque and why I think that throughout the years, lots of women have had issues with their body and body types and the way they're presented in the media. And that is something that I think is very much challenged in the burlesque communities. And I have to remind myself, you guys, you know, if you haven't been to Burlesque Hall of Fame or BurlyCon, you wouldn't know this, but my experience is that in the burlesque communities, it's not a specific Hollywood-type body shape. There are all kinds of women, big, tall, world-famous Bob, she's legally changed her name to world-famous Bob, is this very voluptuous woman who looks like Marilyn Monroe, but she is the most curvy woman on the planet. I mean, she is not a small lady. But when she gets up on stage, she has costumes that are designed to show off all those curves. And she doesn't, you know, a little piece right there that kind of sticks out. You see it. You see that divot right there. She doesn't hide it. And I think that's another reason that I find burlesque so appealing, is because it sort of steps outside of that traditional concept of beauty. It really redefines women as well as transforms them. And an audience, a burlesque audience, is also very different than any kind of theater that you would normally see. Mostly people are taught, and I did this during the day when we would go to performances with my kids. Sit down, shut up, focus, you know, no talking in the theater, but not in a burlesque audience. The audience of a burlesque theater is expected to engage, to participate, to yell and scream. There's Minnie Thompson, who's one of my favorites. She sits in the audience and she screams, do it, through the whole show. So not only is there this acceptance of the body types of women, different body types, but there's also this really supportive kind of environment that I find is just, I don't know, again, back to that concept of the revered outsider. There's people that typically tend to be outsiders if they can formulate their own networks outside and can have support, then, you know, being an outsider is not that big of a deal. Becomes,
you're an insider now.
You're an insider in the outside. Yeah, exactly. So
you, okay.
I was going to say, were you teaching and doing burlesque?
I was, you know what, and I'm still currently with Scandalesque. I'm producing the show, and I'm the administrative director on the Burlesque Weekend and helping them a lot with their business. But I was a student then, and I'm still a student now. But I do, outside of that, I do my own solo routines that I'm working on. Because we're hoping to go, I'm hoping to drag Christy Pyra out to a European tour, which sounds more glamorous than it actually is. It really means I don't want to be in Arizona during the summer, and my mother-in-law lives in Edinburgh, where it's much more comfortable. So over in Europe, people are just hungry for burlesque. So yes, I was doing classes, but I was performing a little bit, and I was very concerned about it, but honestly, the teachers that I worked with knew, and people seem to be, I think when you approach it from the standpoint of this is who I am, this is what I do, and people are less inclined to be uncomfortable with it. Of course, I didn't tell the students or anything, that wasn't, because I'm very particular about boundaries in the classroom, and I don't think the kids ever saw me with my hair down. There was actually one moment where my clip broke in the middle of class, and it was like, oh, Hadaway's hair is falling down. It was shocking to them. But I did do classes and did a little bit of performance, but I didn't really break out and do any of my solo stuff and really jump in the burlesque world until completing teaching. Just to be on the safe side. I'm a Southern girl, so I'm a bit more. Arizona has a lot of blurring of boundaries that my Southern sensibilities aren't necessarily always comfortable with. So. And I think it's important to note, too, that when we do these shows, we're in a theater, and it's an adult audience only, 21 or older. You know, it's not what's coming through your television that you can see. Europeans seem to think we're so weird because they seem to be very comfortable with their bodies and what they do on stage, and people are always so shocked. But really and truly, I spend more time and more money trying to look naked than I actually am naked. You'll never see me, and Catherine DeLish, she, God love her, she's got this incredible body, and she really gets down to next to nothing. Christy and I, on the other hand, we always have our flesh-colored nude tights that are fishnets that are on underneath. And if you get up close enough, you can see them, but from far away, it still looks like we don't have anything on. I always have a G-string under a thong, under a, I've got all these layers. And I mean, you may see my boobs to a certain extent, but for the most part, really and truly, I'm pretty covered up. So I still go back to my theater days where it's about an illusion and creating a feeling rather than reality, During the day, this is what I look like.
So you mentioned you've done some classes and like other things for the burlesque itself. Is there still something available like that in Phoenix for people, or?
There definitely is, and I have all kinds of stuff that I can give you. In fact, and that'd be a good time to pass out some information with what we're doing now. We have classes, adult dance classes. And honestly, the women that, I'll just give you something to pass around if you guys don't mind. The women that I've taken classes with really formed a tight bond and a tight relationship. And I know this doesn't, you can go back to work because I'm talking about women classes.
Come on, we need some more men burlesque dancers.
Are there actually any guys that do this?
You know what? There is a section called Boylesque.
Boylesque?
But I'll be very honest with you, it tends to pull in a lot from the gay community. Not that there aren't any straight men. Actually, the one that I was talking to you about with the Cyprianism, that's Frankie Vivid and his wife Michelle Lamore, who are in Chicago. He's very philosophical. My minor was in philosophy, so I have kind of an interest in things from the intellectual side standpoint. And actually, that's my routines. When I do my solo routines, I have a tendency to be more metaphorical and philosophical. But Frankie Vivid is very involved in the burlesque community in Chicago, and he's not gay, of course, because he's married to Michelle Lamore, but I think he does more of the business side of things, and a lot of MCs. You'll find a lot of straight men MCs who do burlesque. There's usually a call for that. So,
other questions?
Yeah, so you run the business side of it, pretty much. Like, are you finding yourself getting larger theaters where you can actually start to support, or are you still pretty much hobby in it?
I was promoted to do the business side of it about 3 weeks ago. So I'm just getting going. Thank you. But I am finding that, the company's actually in flux at the moment. We were at the Cherry Lounge for quite some time, and we had a lot of support in there and a regular audience. The Cherry Lounge changed ownership, and we weren't as pleased with the way they were running the new place. So we are currently trying to sort of get our footing again. I think that the girls do a great job when they go out and go to different places, but ideally I would like to see them in one spot to have a home. I think that works best.
Yeah, do you find your merchandise sales are better in a home spot, or when you're on the road?
Usually when there's some sort of focal point where you have a home. And I'm looking at this from a business standpoint. The reason I picked it up from a business standpoint is I think I'm done with Arizona heat, and I'm going back home to Georgia. And I would really, really like to organize my own theater with my own classes and really focus on the health and wellness and the empowerment of women. So I'm looking at it, what works best. And my experience is that having that home spot works the best. You can always run out of that. You can always pull people out and have certain members of the company go traveling around. But ideally, I think that home base is, especially with what we do, because honestly, just lugging these from the parking deck over there, hassle,
Well, yeah, shows are costly no matter what you do. They take more money off than they pull out. That's why I'm wondering how you're balancing that. Like, are the classes actually compensating for some of the? They
are. The classes do. They make up for quite a bit. But I think Christy would teach even if it wasn't a matter of money. I think she just has a natural love for teaching, and that's primarily what she would do anyway. But we're finding that it is more challenging to balance those two aspects. And that's sort of why I'm coming in, and I'm using this event this weekend sort of as a template to see, okay, what are we doing wrong, and what have we identified that we need to do better. So my goal from a marketing standpoint is really to get the ladies to define themselves more as far as what kind of company they are, and are they going to focus more on, are they going to focus more on the performance, are they going to focus more on the teaching aspect, who are you, and then be able to push that out into the media. This is who we are, and then to generate a specific target audience who will then come back and feedback.
Well, I know when Scandalesque first launched, they got that New Times bump, and that was really, really helpful. And then their shows were got a little bit better attendance. How are you interacting with media right now? Are you actually using a person to go out there and contact directly, or are you just kind of like winging it?
To be honest with you, I had an interview with Arizona Republic recently. I feel like our time constraints right now have kind of limited, and I have to wear a lot of hats. But my dad grew up with a father who was in PR, so I am definitely taking advantage of that and talking to him in full extent as far as what's our next move. Because although our focus is on the weekend, we do need to sort of share up what's next, and who are we going to. And I think that with me jumping into this business side, I'm meeting the contacts, I'm meeting the people now. Photography. It is interesting, once you meet one person here and there, it always just opens the door to somebody else. So I'm talking to a photographer at New Times, and I'm talking to, we did an interview for AZ Republic, and then just really sort of figuring out, okay, what's our next move with the ad campaign, because it's a little all over the place right now, and I kind of just want to pull it together. So I feel like I'm just sort of in the middle of the storm and am ready to sort of back away at the end of it and say, okay, this is what we did wrong, this is what we need to do again, and figure out where to go from there. So,
what do you think are your biggest successes so far in your 3 weeks?
in my 3 weeks, yeah, in my 3 weeks. I think that we just have something that's different enough. It's a niche market. It's unique, and the girls all believe in what they're doing. And I think that really, when you believe in what you're doing and you have a supportive environment, that can definitely push anything forward. So I think from a strength standpoint, we have that. And you know, I was lucky. I had some health issues, which is why I quit teaching last year. But I was lucky from the standpoint that I got to jump into this and do the business standpoint of it, with the help of my darling husband. So I think that just the networking is ideally the biggest push, and knowing people in the right places and getting it out, because it is kind of a strange thing. It doesn't really fit anywhere. It doesn't really fit in health and wellness. It doesn't necessarily fit in the traditional theater realm. It's hard. It's hard to sort of find that niche. But sponsors, I think, too, are really helpful, finding out who would like to sponsor us. And I have noticed that, like, the lingerie stores are big on it, but also the health and wellness places. Lifetime Fitness is sponsoring us. A naturopathic place called Bodhi Body is sponsoring us. And so I think they really see the need to boost health and wellness, and then also the female portion of that, confidence, empowering, transforming women. So lots of nutritional places. That's really who our sponsors, and that support, where that support's coming from.
Do you guys use actually, I got one more.
No, go ahead.
Do you guys use a centralized director, or do you guys create your own pieces and then kind of work the show out as collective?
And that is something. My background being in theater, I was used to a very specific style where you have a stage manager and you have a director, and it's very cohesive and everybody knows exactly what they're doing. I think up to this point, Scandalesque has had a lot of individual ladies doing different things. There's Juliana Curtis and Christy Zamlo, who are the creators, and they seem to work well together, but they have hired in various people for different shows, who sort of, like the twins do more of a Cirque du Soleil aerial routine. And then we've got Jose Soto, who does his own dances. So, and that is interesting about burlesque, that I find is it's harder to find that cohesiveness that was there with theater that I'm used to. but at the same time, it does mean that everybody can sort of take their own individual experiences and just fine-tune their own pieces and then just bring it together, and then we can just sort of lay it all out there. It makes it a little bit easier from that standpoint, but I like to see it be more cohesive, so that's what we're working towards.
Good luck.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to come out today.
Thank you, April.
Thank you.